What is grief? And what is it here to teach us? Those are the questions I wrote down on the tear stained pages of my journal while mourning the loss of a dear friend recently. So, to help me answer these questions, I called on my friend, Felice Martin. She's a licensed psychotherapist and counselor who is on a mission to create a world where children are safe and adults are healed so they can live in mental, physical, and spiritual wholeness. Grief is a universal part of the human experience. So, why are there so few meaningful conversations about it, especially now? Because whether we recognize it or not, we're in a collective state of grief and trauma, especially given all the impacts of the pandemic, violent anti-Blackness, and economic uncertainty among us. So to say that 2020 has been a traumatic year is probably the understatement of the century. A lot has happened, and many things have been disrupted or utterly destroyed. And all of it has had a major impact on each and every one of us. As a psychotherapist and counselor, Felice has worked for over 10 years with children, adolescents, and families to address behavior changes, emphasizing non-medication approaches to trauma recovery. And she's here to offer her expert guidance to help us name, nurture, and navigate our grief in the healthiest way possible. We talk about what grief and trauma are, how they tend to show up for Black people living in America, and how we should be taking care of ourselves in the midst of it. In these traumatic times, when it feels like there are so few people we can really trust, I'm so grateful that I'm able to call on thought leaders like Felice to help answer life's most challenging questions. So if you're currently experiencing grief, or if you know someone who is, this conversation is one you do not want to miss. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Felice Martin. Welcome to the show, Felice. How are you?
I am fantastic. So happy to be here and join you on this phenomenal show that you have.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm sure as a mental health professional, you've been supporting so many people lately, given everything that's going on right now. So, I want to first ask you, how are you faring these days?
Self-care is essential. And I know that I've made a decision early on when everything started to actually make sure that I'm taking care of myself, to give myself time so that I can hold space for those who may not necessarily have the training or the skills to really work through the concerns that they may have. So I made a decision early on. I take every Wednesday off. That's my time, administrative time, to do things of that nature. I am a big yogi, so I do that every morning. I have a wonderful, wonderful yoga guru that I work with. So it's important. I want to make sure that I'm showing up and I'm practicing what I'm preaching. So, yeah.
That's good to hear. I'm so glad to hear that. Now, can you take a quick moment to share the greater mission that drives your work?
Oh, my goodness. My mission is to create a world where children are safe and adults are healed so that they can live in mental, spiritual, and physical wholeness. That's my overarching mission. And I want to do this one parent, one child, one generation at a time, because I know that if I'm just changing one person's life, then I know the generations will be changed. So I am a beast when it comes to that. I am very committed to making sure that anybody that I come into contact with is able to live mentally free.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Living mentally free. So, Felice,
Yeah.
what led you down this path as a career choice?
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, what led me down this path is, I think this path found me. Quite frankly, I this is my second career, and I was initially very actively involved in public administration. I honestly believe that I ran from this work because I never felt adequate enough to do this work. Um, and so I ran from it. And then, I had I guess, a midlife moment in my life. I was just, I gave into, I embraced the call of my life. And I know the things that I've gone through personally, and people would always come to me and talk to me, but I wanted to make sure that I am providing ethical services to really help those individuals who've been assigned to me live their best life and live mentally free. So I always say this, I didn't choose this profession. This profession chose me, and I can honestly say that I have never been this excited and focused in my life. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to serve.
And that's what happens when you are walking squarely in your purpose and in your calling. So, as a trauma informed psychotherapist and counselor, how would you define trauma?
Trauma, interestingly enough, trauma is anything that you as an individual is unable, you're not able to really cope with or manage those issues. So, for example, the loss of a dog could be traumatic for some people. Physical abuse is traumatic. Sexual abuse is traumatic. Spiritual abuse is traumatic. And I see that, even what we're going through now is traumatic.
It
Each
is.
of us, anybody that is clothed in the skin that, the complexion of my skin or blackness, anybody in that regard has experienced some type of trauma, either person to person, or it could be something that has been transferred down from generation to generation. So, trauma is anything we don't have the skills, or maybe we're not even aware that we have the skills to address and work through whatever those concerns are.
Now, you're
And that's,
someone. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Courtney, I like to make it practical. I mean, I can
Mm-hmm.
give you the textbook definition, but let me just tell you, at the end of the day, this is practical stuff. You know, another thing that could be traumatic is frequent transitions. Think
Yeah.
about people who move from place to place to place. That's traumatic, and we don't think about that as trauma. We think of, it just is what it is. But yeah.
I was watching a recent interview on The Breakfast Club, and they had Pastor Michael Todd from Transformation Church
Hmm.
in Oklahoma on, and they were talking about trauma. And he mentioned how success could be a form of trauma, like,
Yeah.
meteoric success, because, his rise has been meteoric. So, what do you say to that? Can success be a trauma?
It can. And you know what? Interestingly enough, success can be a trauma. And what I've actually find is that a lot of adolescents or young adults that I work with who are like, what do they call type A, are they're go-getters. They grind. They're really focused. That can be very traumatic because the level of expectation of them is so high that there's a fear that they may not make it. So, there's a saying, all that glitters isn't gold. That is a fine example of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine
Mm-hmm.
that everything that you do, every step you make, every tweet, or whatever you have out there is scrutinized. That's traumatic. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we see it we see it in professional athletes, we see it
Mm-hmm.
in actors, we see it in, I mean, let's look at I cannot think, I can see the young lady's face, but she was on, it was a show in the 90s. I can't even, I think it's not Tatiana. I cannot think of her name. Campbell. Her mom is
Oh,
BB
yes.
Campbell.
Yes. Maya
Yes.
Campbell from In the
Maya
House.
Campbell.
Yep.
Yes, yes. So think about that. Think we see it every single day, and I mean, think about Mr. West.
Yeah.
Is he not? I
Yeah.
mean, that's trauma. That's
Absolutely.
trauma. Now I don't know him personally, but I'm just saying what is manifesting is steeped in some type of traumatic experiences.
Mm. So
Yeah.
you're someone who specializes in supporting Black people in your work. You have a culturally informed approach, and I'd argue that being Black in America is a very specific kind of trauma. You mentioned it earlier, given our history with racism in this country, but it's not just past trauma that we're dealing with. It's present day trauma too. I mean, it seems like so
Yeah.
often we're inundated with headlines, news reports, and videos on social media, especially social media, around things like police brutality and white vigilantism that snuff out the lives of those in our community. And it's like we're constantly being traumatized and reminded of those things in our
Yeah.
community. So, from your perspective, what kind of effect does all this stuff have on us?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we see it every day. Let's start with the physical effects. We have obesity is an issue. All right. So let's think about, that impact of the trauma, because I'm stressed. And I
Mm-hmm.
may not even be eating a lot, but check this out. There's cortisol that runs through our body. And so that is a stress hormone, right? And so that stress hormone makes it difficult to lose weight and to eat right. So, I mean, that's something that's very, physical, something that we can like connect with. Let's think about heart disease. If you're worried all the time, like if you're worried about, if I go out, if my son goes out, my husband goes out, my dad goes out, or even if I go out, am I going to be accosted by the police? What's going on with that? Or if I go to the store, am I going to be, followed around? And am I, if I'm the only black one on my job, am I going to be fired? Or it's just, it's a lot. So we are, you know, impacted by the day-to-day activities, the constant, oh my goodness, the constant pictures and stories. And, it gets to the point, it's like, okay, who died today? And you know what, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to tell you, Courtney, I was moved this weekend. I have this Black Lives Matter shirt, and on the back of the shirt, the last person who was on there was Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
All right. Because they had the people's names on the back. I was like, well, damn, my shirt is kind of old.
That's so tragic, right?
Isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, and this was just in maybe July, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
Yeah. So think about that. That shirt is old. And that is traumatizing.
it is. So, as you support your clients who might be black and who might be steeped in, both ancestral trauma and present day trauma, what is your approach to supporting them? What tips and what advice do you have for them to really care for themselves?
Yes, and I love that question because my approach, number one, is I use a brain-based approach, a neuroscience-based approach, and the reason I do that is because I think it's important to understand what is going on. Some people will call and they think that, or, set up an appointment and they think it's in their head. And I literally say, yeah, it is in your head. And I talk to them about the emotional brain. I talk to them about the triggers, there, and I break down the whole aspect of what this brain looks like. And me personally, when I talk to them, I say, look, this is what therapy is about. You have this part of your brain that is your primitive brain. This is your go-to response. You're going to either fight, flight, or freeze when you feel triggered, period. And you know why you do that? Why? Because there's a story that's associated with that. So that story part of your brain rests in what's called the hippocampus, which is the memory center of your brain. Okay. And so then they're like, wow, really never thought about that. And I said, and then you go up there to, there's a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. And that's the part of the brain that is the habit forming part of your brain. So basically, whatever habits you have been using, if they're not working for you, then you're going to constantly be in this cycle. Okay. And so I tell them, I said that, look, the goal is to come up with some new habits, some ways that you can really address the trauma that you're experiencing. And the reality is, I will hold space for you, but at the end of the day, this is your stuff. And there has to be a level of commitment for you to want to excavate and understand, what's going on. Because once you understand, is it going to go away? Probably not. But what will happen is that you'll be equipped to really move through life in such a way that you're aware and you can make good choices and good decisions that really honor and respect yourself as well as respect others.
I'm glad you mentioned the word trigger because we have a viewer question, and They ask, what are some suggestions or methods to overcome trauma you didn't realize you were suppressing, but it was triggered due to another trauma?
Yep. Exactly. And there again, you go. So basically, what's happening is that they probably didn't know that they had this trauma going on until they were exposed to another trauma, which triggered it. So if somebody came to me like that, I would really wonder what story is associated with that trauma. Because when you know what that story is, then you know, oh, okay, is this a implicit memory or is it an explicit memory? Where is this coming from? Um, where did I get this message from? How is this how is this mental map established in my brain? Um, you can look at it and be curious. I like really be curious. Do not, if you run from it, then guess what? It's still going to be there. You got to face it. You
Yeah.
got to face it. So
And
that's what I would do. Mhm.
and it's so hard to sometimes face, right? Because
Yes.
when we are triggered, when we experience trauma, oftentimes life does not stop. So what do we do when we're expected to move on, or when we just
Yeah.
feel like we have to move on, especially those who have children or other
Yeah.
obligations and responsibilities? How can they overcome or care for themselves after they
Yeah.
realize that they are in fact traumatized or have been traumatized?
Yes, and the thing is that it's not a destination. So I always say that life is a journey of discovery. So you're discovering those things about yourself. You're discovering those things that trigger you, and or whatever. You're learning about yourself, and we learn by interacting with other people, and things of that nature. So I think that it's very. I would never tell a person and if I said it, please, yeah, I never would never say get over it. I would say look at it, see what it's about. What's that story? And then with that story, how did you gotta like connect? How did you feel when that was going on? What was going on? Did you feel dismissed? Okay, so are you moving through life in a dismissive trance?
Mm.
For example, you
Mm.
dismiss yourself, you dismiss, other people dismiss you, and it's not on purpose. It just is. And I see this play out like this. So if somebody says, well, every time, I had a performance at school, like my parents weren't able to be there for me, but I was just okay because I was able to just go through and I just did it myself. And I'm like, okay, so that bothered you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you now, and it's funny because to see those eyes open up, because it's like, okay, that bothered you, right? Yeah, it did. Let me tell you what you just did. You just dismissed how you felt. So tell me how you felt when nobody showed up for you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm telling you, we will see patterns. We see that in control. We see that in even with grief. It's almost like not this happened to me. And I just kept it moving because that's what we do
Yeah.
until we blow up. And it's like, yeah, you blow up, you're that angry person, you always got an attitude and all this other stuff, but it's really nothing personal towards another individual. It's some unresolved stuff that I have. So,
So, Felice, what can trauma teach us?
mm. Oh, that is so good. I love it. I love it. What can trauma teach us? Hmm. Let me just ask this question. What has trauma taught me? Trauma has taught me that I am brave, that I am a survivor, that I'm a thriver. Trauma teaches us that there are people who care about me. I may not know them directly, but there are people who care about me. Trauma has taught me that I have a voice. I have a right to say no. I have a right to advocate for myself. Trauma has taught me that I am not what happened to me. Okay. I am, and I hate using this word, but I'm gonna use this word. I am stronger. I'm more resilient. And resilient resiliency and strong does not mean I don't need anybody. What it to me, it means, you know what, you got that bounce back. You're gonna make it. You're gonna keep moving forward no matter what. And guess what? I'm gonna look and see where those blind spots are. I'm gonna look and see what are those things that's holding me back. You know, and can it be scary? Yeah, it can be. But trauma teaches us to face our truth. Like, if this happened, am I stuck in it? Or am I ready to move forward? Am I and moving forward does not mean that, I'm just going to compartmentalize this stuff, or I'm going to put this stuff on the shelf. No, it means that, you know what, you whatever it is no longer has control over you.
Hmm.
You have control over the choices and the decisions that you make, that I make. Hmm.
So, Felice, one of the outcomes of trauma is grief. And I want to turn our attention to this idea of grief. So, how would you define grief?
Hmm. Grief, just like trauma, is something, an incident, an action, a situation that occurs to you where one does not feel that they have the power or think that they have the power to overcome or manage the particular circumstance or situation.
So, grief isn't just about the physical death of a loved one or friend. How else does grief present itself?
Yes, so grief happens in many different forms. Grief, of course, you mentioned it's the loss, it's the death of a loved one, or a friend, a family member, someone close. It could be the death of a celebrity. I know we were all grieving with Chadwick Boseman
Yeah,
died.
yeah.
Um, that's a form of grief. The political oppression is a form of grief. Racism, oh my goodness, is a form of grief. Also, the loss of a pet could be a form of grief. The loss of, like with children, if you're moving around a lot, you're losing your friends. As far as you're not in um, connection with them physically, that could be grief. Being at COVID, the deaths of people with dealing with COVID, the could be grief. COVID, in the sense of, job loss, schools being closed, that's grief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
that's,
why do you believe grief is such a difficult thing for us to handle?
hmm You said, why do I believe grief is a difficult thing to handle?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, because we don't learn how, because we've been socialized to hide our feelings. That's why it's so difficult, you know.
Mm.
And yeah, like, don't cry, be strong, it's gonna be okay. Da 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 da. Don't tell me it's gonna be okay, because darn it, I am not feeling okay right now. Okay,
Right.
I need you to tell me, girl, go roll on that floor, whatever you need to do, kick, scream, holler, whatever it is, cuss,
Right.
fuss, do what you need to do, address it. And so I really, that really, every time I think about it, it just amazes me how, we're supposed to be so real and all this other stuff, but we don't face stuff, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And,
mhm,
and that suppression, and to your earlier point about dismissing our own feelings, can come up later. So at the time of this conversation, we're dangerously close to experiencing nearly 200,000 COVID-19 related deaths in this country. It's almost unimaginable. And ever since the beginning of this pandemic, Felice, I've been disturbed by the lack of acknowledgement by our president and the administration around how traumatic this all is and has been for each and every one of us, especially for those who have lost someone due to COVID. And tragedy is not a stranger to this, to this nation, right? In fact, I vividly remember 9/11 and how it seemed like as a country, we were given the space and the permission to actually grieve and process the 2,977 lives lost on that fateful day. And it's in stark contrast to today, where we're experiencing that amount of death a whopping 67 times over. So, Felice, if I'm
yeah,
honest, I fear the damage that's being done by our inability to process it all.
yeah,
5, 10, 15, even 50 years from now. It's like we're
Yeah.
expected to move on with life as usual. We see things opening
Yeah.
up. There's no collective grieving, it seems. So what
Yes.
happens to a community when its people don't take the time to process and grieve?
We become zombies. Period. Yeah, we just walk around like it's okay. And that's the point. That's the point. We become disconnected. We become numb. We become when there's a trauma experience, people either become hyper vigilant, where they're just like um always looking out for that threat, or we become hypo vigilant, which basically means, I'm just chilling, like nothing's, like I'm just compartmentalized, and I'm just going around, just doing life as usual. And I think that's the way we become, what happens as a nation if we don't address it, if we don't allow ourselves to grieve, and it breaks my heart even when I think about the children that are doing the homeschool and the virtual schooling, and the impact that it's having on them, and as well as their parents. And it's a lot. And I think that it saddens me that COVID has become a political issue,
Right.
because yeah. And that again, when we operate from the primitive part of our brain, then that's what happens. It becomes a political issue, because that higher level of thinking has not kicked in, or either you don't know how to use it, or you refuse to use the thinking part of your brain. So I think that those are real things that happen. If you don't deal with it, then it doesn't go away. It's still there. It's
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, it's still there.
I heard someone say that if you don't deal with it, it's going to deal with you. And I'm afraid
Yeah.
that how it's going to deal with us in the future is going to be, devastating. It's already devastating right now. So, what do you say to those who are watching and listening, who are acknowledging that what we're experiencing is trauma, who are acknowledging that losing 200,000 people in the course of a few months is not normal, but
Yeah.
yet our entire country and our society expects us to move on as if things are normal? What do you say to those people who are listening and watching today?
Yeah, and ultimately what I'm hearing is that that's a level of confusion of, really, what do I do? Do I protect myself? Do I just go along to get along? Do I make sure that I am listening to the scientist? Do I talk about what it is that I'm experiencing, what it is that I'm feeling? I think that this is a great time. For everybody to at least engage in some type of therapy, speak with someone about, what's going on, what you're experiencing. Because again, yes, it's the deaths, but think about the job, not just but and it's
Yeah.
the death, and think about the job loss. Think about the security. Think about, if I lose my job, then I'm not going to have a place to live. I'm not going to be able to, take care of myself, my family. I'm not going to be able to eat. So it's not just one thing. It's a lot of stuff all mixed up together, and we've got to um, address it. We've got to talk about it. And then also, a lot of times when we are in these types of situations, when we can do something different, in terms of novelty, when we can advocate, when we can volunteer, when we can um, have a sense of belonging, a sense of being a part of something,
Mm-hmm.
um, then, it's important. It helps us to feel better. It gives us that, the releasing oxytocin, these really good bonding chemicals and all that feel good stuff that rushes through our bodies. So we've got to face it. We've got to vote. We've got to, do our part. I don't care if you think you have it or if you don't have it. Put on a mask. And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to put on a mask, then you know what? I'm being judgmental, because I'm usually not. But yes, in this situation I am. If you don't put on a mask, then you don't care. You know,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
care. You don't care. So yeah, do your thing. Put your mask on. Use your hand sanitizer. Wash your hands, and just be respectful of each other.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Ever since all of this started happening, we're seeing just how divided we all are on this issue. And you mentioned it earlier how it's been politicized when it's really a public health issue.
Yeah.
So I am curious to know how we're going to deal with it, because scientists are saying, hey, if we don't do something different, we're in this for the long haul. And I am just very concerned about our mental health, not just our physical health. I mean, that's
Hmm.
obvious, but what are some of the consequences of us experiencing this. I mean, I've been reading on Twitter, I've been reading, different accounts on social media, and people are talking about how it's really starting to set in with them. This quarantine, 6 months in, the loneliness, the isolation, the grief. So
Hmm.
that's really my main concern. Now, in
Yeah.
my initial research for this conversation, I discovered that there are stages of grief. So it's not
Yes.
just, grief is not just deep feelings of sadness. So can you take a moment to explain what the stages of grief are?
Absolutely. So we do have stages of grief, and denial or shock is like the first one. And that is the one where it's like, I just cannot believe this is going on. And we can liken it to, let's use this COVID as an example. We've been talking about it. When it happened, it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this is going on. I know personally, I've been thinking about these things. I remember when they had pictures of China and the people had masks on. A part of me was like, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
That looks so strange, because I couldn't believe that something like that would happen
Mm-hmm.
to this nation. And of course it did happen. And so that denial comes in. It's like, I cannot believe it. I didn't know that I would be doing a lot of telehealth. I was thinking, oh, okay, I may, add a few more cases, but no, like, and it hit me the first day I had all of my clients were seen via telehealth. That was that realization. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after we deal with that denial, and you can liken it to anything. If it's a job loss, if it's the loss of a loved one, it's shock and denial. I cannot believe this is happening. I cannot accept it. I cannot believe this is happening. And then from there, anger. You become angry. Why is this happening? I'm very upset.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
am upset. This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair to me. It's not fair to anybody else. And then we do this whole bargaining thing. And bargaining basically is, I'll do anything to change this situation. I want it to feel better. It's painful. Um, and I don't like it. Take me,
Yeah, we often
take this
hear
away
that when
from me.
someone,
Yeah,
who passes away, someone says, "Take me instead." Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Take me. And just coming up with, even if I just give me one more day, one more moment, let me just kind of go back in time and wash my hands, or just do whatever. So you have that bargaining piece. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And
So
that's mm-hmm.
so we
I was gonna
have shock, denial, we
mm-hmm,
have anger, we have denial.
mm-hmm,
What else?
bargaining, and then depression.
Marketing. Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm.
just like the weight, depression. And hey, I'm gonna definitely be aware of this. Depression looks different for, for males, females, black folks, white folks. It looks different. And I do know that a lot of times depression can come out as anger. It comes out as isolation. I'm staying by myself. It can manifest through overeating, undereating. um, it can actually be masqueraded with a smile. How you
Yes.
doing? I'm fine.
The
No,
default answer.
right, exactly. And when I hear that, I'm like, okay, fully in need of encouragement. That's what you need right now. Because yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. So
yeah,
so fine is fully in need of encouragement. I've never heard that before, Felice. You taught me
yes.
something.
That was a nugget. That was a download that came to me because I was a fine girl for so long, and that's
Mm.
all I needed. It's
Mm-hmm.
a little, I see you, that type of thing. Or I may not understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you. you know
Mm-hmm.
so and then once we deal with that depression, there's more so acceptance, and acceptance basically acknowledges that the loss has happened. I do feel angry. Sometimes I may get depressed. I wish this hadn't have happened. This person didn't deserve this. And so we start accepting the loss.
Mm-hmm.
And these stages don't happen all in the same order or anything like that, but they do happen, and it's good for us to be aware of it. And again, like I said earlier, it's important to know that these stages happen in all types of grief. you know so I would
Okay.
just want to make clear that it's not just it's not death. It could be the loss of a job. You just go, it could be a loss of a relationship. um all of those things, loss of position, status, but any type of loss. So there is a level of different stages that we do go through. Hmm.
So, as you know, this show is geared toward Black people, Black
Hmm.
entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers. And while I understand that each individual experiences their own unique grief journey, in my experience, it also seems like as a community, specifically as Black Americans, there are certain ways we tend to grieve culturally, especially if we're affiliated with the Christian faith. So, as a psychotherapist and a counselor, Felice, how important is it that mental health professionals like yourself are mindful of the cultural ways in which people grieve?
Oh yeah, I think that is key. There has to be a level of cultural competency in this work. It's important to know that grief. We can define grief or say that it should look like this, and people should. You can have all these shoulds to it, but the most important thing is to be understanding. Listen. I mean, even from in the Black community, especially the faith-based community, you may have somebody that says, look, my love, if it's a death, they came to me when I had a dream about this person, or I saw this person, or I woke up and they were sitting on the bed. So that doesn't mean that a person is delusional or having visual hallucinations or anything like that. It's just, let me be here with you. I'm not going to judge your pain. I'm not going to judge your grief. I think it's important for psychotherapists to do that. And we are trained. Just a part of our training is a part of that is cultural competency. And we want to add to that cultural competency, holding space,
Yeah.
not, yeah, not projecting my stuff. You should be doing this, or no,
Yeah.
have your grief. Let me, whatever, I'm here for you.
So now I want to talk to the folks who have children in their care while grieving. It's easy to assume that children grieve like adults, but I've come to learn that that's not necessarily the case. And I suspect that, so how can parents or guardians understand what grief looks like in children?
Hmm. Wow. I think that, but basically what I've seen is that it's important for adults to look at, how is this child sleeping? Are they eating? Look at their behaviors. Sometimes people may think, and I see it so often, like, somebody may be diagnosed with ADHD. And then you start doing, would do their background information, the biopsychosocial assessment, and find out that this kid had, like, not one, not two, not three, not four deaths within a 2-year period. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
so but you're supposed to, and kids are so amazing because they actually look to the caregivers in their life and how on ways to respond. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important. I think it's important for adults to be able to, or caregivers to be able to express their emotions, express feelings, and openly do it. You know, as sometimes we as women we want to go in the shower and cry and all that. It's okay to cry and say, you know what, I'm sad. You know, this hurts. You know, I feel, and talk about, you know, how you feel,
Yeah.
and encourage the kids to do that as well. If you see them moping around, I always tell parents to reflect what you see your child doing, like as far as their feelings. So if they're sleeping a lot, you know, hey, you know, Malik, I see you sleeping a lot. You know, kind of what's going on. I know we really haven't talked about X, Y, and Z, or how you're experiencing COVID, or you know, that you're not being able to see your friends. What's up with that? What's going on? And the thing is when they start telling you what's going on, do not say it's gonna be okay, or um, you shouldn't feel that way, or when I was growing up, don't do that.
Yeah,
Please don't.
yeah. Because that's another form of dismissal, right? That's a dismissing of
Exactly.
of that child's feelings and experiences.
Exactly. So just be there. Just, you know, you can, I mean, empathy. Empathy is basically saying, you know, wow, I know that has to be really hard or difficult for you right now. And I want you to know that I'm here for you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important for children, especially in their formative years, to hear that. And
Mhm.
I think, and I appreciate you saying that we need to give ourselves permission to feel and to let them see us experiencing sort of the stages of grief openly, because I think that a lot of parents and guardians often feel like they have to protect their children
Yeah.
from their feelings, right? But I know that that could probably have adverse effects, because if our caregivers are our mirrors in a sense, then and
Hmm.
if we don't see anything in that mirror resembling what we're feeling, then
Hmm.
it's not going to be normalized. We're going to think that something is wrong with us, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's how and that's a part of developing emotional intelligence, because it helps us, and you know, helps our loved ones just really understand how to express themselves, because that's when we end up seeing the explosive anger, the anger outbursts, the just uncontrollable crying spells, is because everything has been locked in for so long that eventually it just took one drop, and that was it. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just exploding, or I'm just going to isolate or engage in self-harm, or you know, other interpersonal things, such as, you know, dying by suicide, because that the idea is let this pain stop. I don't want to feel this pain anymore. That's what it's about. So connecting to the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So grief is a universal human experience. So, what are some ways that we can do a better job of supporting each other and supporting those around us who are experiencing either trauma or grief?
Hmm. And those are, and actually, trauma and grief are very similar. You know, it can be traumatic grief. I think it's important, just universally. One of the most important things is to listen, to really listen. Don't, like, make sure we're not telling people how to feel. So definitely want to make sure that we're listening, and reflective listening is just reflecting back, you know, what it is that you hear this person saying, or what it is that you see this person showing, like their nonverbal, and we look at the nonverbal and verbal cues as well. So I think listening is very important. And then a lot of times we hear this, oh, well, you know, if you need anything, let me know. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not even, when we experience that grief, our brain is just kind of taking a jolt, like a shock. So I don't know what I need. You know, I don't know what I need, but whatever, you know, whatever you can bring or do or whatever, you know, thank you. I'm appreciative of it all, but just don't come talking my ear off unless I ask you to, or engage with
Right.
you like that. 'Cause that, you know, that happens. And that's nervous energy. So I think as a collective, just as humans, be present, listen, and one more thing I'm going to give it, just like, don't project how you would do certain things. Just empathize with what this individual is feeling and experiencing in the moment.
So I want to speak to the people watching and listening who might be grieving themselves. I'm one of them. I shared, publicly that I recently lost a dear friend to suicide. So that's traumatic grief. So, what are
Yes.
some ways that we can care for ourselves during our own grief journeys?
hmm it's definitely important to journal. And I know that sounds so. I don't know how it sounds. Some people either you like to write or you don't, and it's not journaling for a grade. Okay, so just and think of it like and you can do it on your phone too, an audio journal. But think about it like a brain dump. I'm just emptying my brain of everything that I'm feeling right now, and I'm thinking it doesn't have to make sense. I need to get it out, because if not, it's just all cluttered in there. Um, Also, some things that have been helpful, especially when I work with children who have experienced grief, is they actually do like this. I had this activity where they wrote a song about the person that they're grieving. Poems, you can turn that into a poem. Also, doing a memory box. Those are good things that we can all do in order to honor, if especially if we're looking at loss. We can honor that person's life, and then we can also use those things to take some time. If it's a job loss that we're grieving, and this, we had this whole thought of being and doing certain things, it's really essential to, there again, brain dump, talk about it, write about it, find, engage in therapy, and that would be really good as well.
So Felice, what can grief teach us?
hmm ooh, my goodness. Grief teaches us how to really tune in, to be aware of what we're feeling. Grief teaches us how to really honor memories, honor moments. I think grief can teach us how to um, what is it, like, take lemons and make lemonade. So you take this, this may be a bad situation that hurts, a painful situation, but it can teach us that we're resilient and that we can bounce back, and that we have coping skills. Everything, I believe that everything that we have, that we need, is inside of us. And so grief can teach us to really um, capture that,
Mm-hmm.
to tune into um, our inner strength.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, so Felice, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, and I do hope that those who are watching and listening um, have received something that they can take back and really use to help them during their inevitable grief journey. Like I said, grief is a universal part of the human experience. So you might not be experiencing it right now, but you're going to experience it at some point in time. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the people who have impacted you positively, because this show is called Think Like a Thought Leader. And I'd be remiss if I
Yes.
didn't ask you what thought leaders have helped pave the way for you on your journey.
Oh, wow. I think one most recently, and I've been following her for a while, is Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she is a social scientist, and she does a lot of work on post-traumatic slave syndrome, from an empowerment, a value perspective, in terms of helping Black people who are descendants of enslaved people to really understand their value. And I just love her work. I love her passion. She has just been absolutely amazing, and really helping, my thought process, and really bringing it all together. I also, a great Black neuroscientist, Black female, Shantae Javon Taylor, has been very instrumental in helping me to really understand the brain and how it works and how it impacts us, in our everyday lives, and how to really, really harness the power of the mind and the power of the brain to really thrive. And also you, Miss Courtney, I know we met a while back, and just seeing your journey has inspired me to continue on, to continue moving forward, and really knowing that you show up, be present, know who you are, and know what your call is, and do it. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you, Felice. Oh, don't make me cry.
you you're welcome
Thank you
from the
so
heart,
much. Thank
from the
you. I
heart.
so appreciate those kind words. Now, let's talk about what's next for you. I know that when we were talking in the virtual green room, you were mentioning some exciting things that you have in store that's going to help people really understand how to process their trauma, their grief, and just the things that happen in life.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I am so excited. I will be launching a app that is it will help Black millennials really address various mental health concerns, mental wellness concerns, and the beauty of it is that when they address it, they're going to be working directly with therapists and medical mental health professionals who look like them. And so I'm really excited about that. And just so that you guys will know, it is called Talk Black Therapy, and that's Talk Black Therapy. And let me just tell you how the name came about, if I can. And
Yes, I
that'll
would
be
love
launching
to.
in November. Yes. So when I was growing up, right, it was this whole thing, you talk black, or you talk this way and you talk that way. And so it was seen as something negative. So I'm taking that back. Yes, let's talk black
Yes.
so we can, keep it real and really be relatable, so we don't have to swim through all this other stuff. And so this will be, we're going to start out in Georgia, and California and Oklahoma. And from there, we're going to branch out all over the United States of America. And so we will be the first premium app, I believe, for Black people, Black therapists to work together so that we can uplift our people and really help all of us live mentally free.
That is so important, Felice. So, why Black millennials? Why did you believe that was the segment of people that needed your help the most?
Because they're in a place of transition. They're in a place of transition, trying to figure this whole thing out. I think Black millennials have definitely grown professionally. They are entrepreneurial minded. They are thought leaders. They've been through this thing of, you know, I can do whatever I want to do. I can win. I can work. I can have my business, so forth and so on. And yes, and so with that comes a mindset that has to be rooted and grounded in knowing and authenticity, knowing who you are and showing up. Um, and so that's where we'll start. And then of course the goal is to definitely go down the spectrum, working with children, as we grow. We'll
Right.
definitely be doing that as well. And then our Black millennials are having children. So remember,
Yes.
if my mission is to create a world where children are safe and adults are healed, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're gonna make this happen because we got to be free. And I know I'm going on a little bit, but I just want to tell you this because this is my heart. I love Harriet Tubman, and I love what she stood for. She made sure that people were physically free, and I want to make sure that people are mentally free. And that's what I'm about. And that's the people that I interact with, they're about that as well. Mental freedom.
And Felice, I really value that because we cannot have physical freedom without mental freedom first. And I so
Yeah.
appreciate the work that you're doing. It's so necessary. So, what final words of advice do you have for those who are watching or listening to help them address their grief and their trauma in a healthy way?
Yes. So the first thing I'm going to always go to, talk to a therapist. It's okay. Talk to a therapist, utilize you working or not working, you have insurance benefits. It's not as I don't know, it's not what you're seeing on TV. It's not this whole, untouchable thing to do. I think that it's just when you seek therapy, if you're dealing with trauma or grief, it's important to know that you don't have to do this alone. And a lot of times we can go to our support system, which is great, but there's a time where you don't need advice. That's Therapy is not about advice. Therapy is really helping you to dig deep so that you can be free. Oh my goodness. Yes. So that's what it's about. I would tell them to get a therapist. Um, and when you get your therapist, be real. Talk about, make sure if there's a connection there, your therapist is not a mind reader. Be real. Let them know what's
Right.
going on.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Because closed mouths don't get fed, and we cannot get
exactly.
help if we're not being truthful. So I completely agree with that. Don't go lying to your therapist, y'all. Because then you're wasting your
Exactly.
time, you're wasting their time,
Yeah.
and you're wasting your money if you have to pay for one. So, Felice,
Yeah.
this has been an incredible conversation. I'm sure that there are those who are watching and listening who really resonate with your approach and with your perspective. So, how can people connect with you?
Well, you can connect with me at www.bhacounseling.com. That's the website. And that's www.b as in boy, h as in health, a as in apple, counseling.com. I'm also on Instagram, Felice Martin, LPC. I'm on Facebook, Felice Martin, LPC, or actually it's Felice at BHA Counseling on Facebook. And definitely, go to the website. I have a free 15-minute phone consultation. There's also a sign up form so that you can stay in touch, because I really, really want to make sure that I keep you in the loop about the app that's going to be launching in November. So, yeah.
And we're so looking forward to it. Thank you again for taking the time out of, I'm sure, what is a busy schedule to share your brilliant insights with us. And Felice, I consider you a thought leader. And I hope that others who are listening and watching really take what you say to heart and apply it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And, this is my mission. This is my mission. And what you're doing. I mean, you're exposing the masses to people who may have never, crossed paths or whatever the case may be. So we all have a role to play, and we all need to play our role, and everything else is going to fall in place.
I
Period,
believe
as they
that.
say.
That's right. Period, Pooh.
I love it. Okay.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Courtney.
Now, if you enjoyed this conversation and it inspired you in some way, then please feel free to spread the word by sharing it with someone who you believe needs to see or hear it. And if you love today's show, you'll definitely want to sign up to be notified when I have other insightful conversations to help you build wealth related to your calling by texting me at 404 737 4957. That way, you'll never miss another discussion when it airs, and you'll also periodically receive communication tips to help you position your brand and business as a thought leader in your industry. And finally, in an effort to stay true to our vision and remain unbought, unbossed, and unapologetic, we've created the opportunity for those of you who enjoy this transformational content to support us monetarily through Patreon. So for as little as $5 a month, you can invest in a network dedicated to creating programming for the upliftment and enrichment of Black people through media and entrepreneurship. So to patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com and hit that green button that says, "Let's build this." Or if you're more comfortable doing a one-time contribution instead, you can go ahead and click that blue button, which allows you to give via PayPal. Your monthly or one-time investment will help build a groundbreaking multimedia company that will shift paradigms and empower a generation of leaders and entrepreneurs with thoughtful programming and high quality content. So, to learn more about how you can donate and how you can patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com. And we thank you so much in advance for your support. That's all for us. Thanks for tuning in.